Student Economy.
A class of kids.
Crucial, thought-provoking questions.
And occasionally something serious mixed in.
Featuring the kids of Shreff Tech.
And Brad Schreffler.
Alright, welcome to, I guess we're on episode 5 of the Student Economy podcast with the kids of Shreff Tech and myself, Brad Schreffler. I am joined today by my second period class, and as always, some extras who just don't know how to leave and have a problem. And so, our opening conversation, our opening conversation is the question: is water wet? And I want nothing to do with this, so I'm going to pass it off to Perry. Why not? You're here. Go ahead.
All right.
Let's start with just a simple yes/no. Perry, is water wet?
I want to say no.
It's a yes or no question.
Okay. Can we actually go around the other side of the table real quick?
Oh my God.
The question, okay.
Is water wet, Charlie?
Water itself is not wet, but it makes...
Yes or no.
Stop.
We're trying to find
yes or no.
Fine.
This is
if we
a
were
struggle.
talking about...
Yes or no. Stop talking.
If we were talking
Charlie,
about...
is water wet?
No, fine.
Thank
I'm
you.
on the side of
No. Colton, is water wet?
No, it is not.
Absolutely not.
That's Preston.
Preston, by the way, no. Tyler?
Water is not wet.
And Perry.
All right. Water is wet.
You're literally just being contrary.
We need somebody on the other side.
You need somebody on the other side.
This goes back to last week's meme culture crap. Like, this is not a real question. This is not...
It is a real question.
It is a
No,
real
it's not.
question.
Schreffler, explain to me why you think water is wet.
I don't care if water is wet. That's my point, is this question has no value.
But, like, when you pour your water into your cup,
Why don't
does that also make the cup wet? Or...
Yes, the cup is wet. That's not the question.
Wait.
The cup is wet.
But that would imply that water's wet.
No, water is the thing that causes wet.
Yeah.
So, is water then wet?
Does
Wet
does fire get burned?
Yes.
Yes.
No, it doesn't. You can't burn fire. Fire is the thing that makes a burn.
Okay, but
fire
we're
is
talking
burned.
about fire compared to water. You can't compare those two.
But that's
it's
his
like
point.
comparing apples to
That's the point.
oranges.
If you pour water on something, stop hitting the table. If you pour water on something, it becomes wet. If you put fire on something, it becomes burned. Fire is not burned.
So therefore,
water
fire
is not wet.
burned. Water is wet.
That's not how transitive property works.
Yes. That's exactly that transitive.
No, it's not.
I transfer stupidity onto Schreffler, and Schreffler
That is true.
therefore gets upset.
No, I get dumber. You transfer stupidity on me, and I get dumber. That is true. I will agree to that. This is just, again, a long line of questions that are pointless.
You can't make someone stupid, though.
But I mean, water is...
I have clear evidence. I have clear evidence to the contrary.
Wetness refers to the experience we have with water.
So is ice wet? Let's put it that way. Is ice wet?
Is not wet because it's frozen.
When it is melted.
When it is melted. When it's
Then it's
melting.
just
then
Then it's just water.
No,
then you're
it's
saying
not,
water is
because ice
wet.
itself is frozen.
You literally
The
just
water
said when
melting.
ice melts, it becomes water. Therefore, it is wet.
No.
There you say water is
It's
wet.
not ice anymore.
Oh my God! But
It's
no,
not ice
the
anymore.
ice.
If ice has fully melted, then it is water. If there is a half-melted piece of ice, it is wet.
It's
it is
probably
wet
wet.
ice.
Yeah, I agree
But
with
then
that.
there's
I
water
agree.
underneath it, so therefore the water is wet, making the ice cube wet.
No, you're grasping
the
at
ice cube
straws
is just
here.
wet
No,
because of the
I'm
water.
really not.
You're really.
No, I'm not.
I don't know. It literally is just it is a question designed to annoy you. Like, it's not a question you're actually seeking an answer to. And that's why I say it's pointless and this meme culture is ridiculous, because you're just a dog eating its own tail. Like, you're intentionally
But at least you're
running in
having
circles.
fun.
Well, okay, I get that, but God, there's way better ways to have fun.
Very good.
And I get it. I feel like an old man screaming, "Get off my lawn." I understand. Like, you silly kids. I get it. But still,
Oh, that's because you're like 30-something. And
Easy
we're like,
peasy.
I'm half your age, Mr. Shepard.
Whoa! She just
Jackie,
called you
I
the
got-
O word.
First of all, no, you're not. Let's be clear. You
Well,
are-
I'm actually 16, and you're like almost 32.
Ooh.
So, oh wait, no, I'm 17. Not 16.
What?
How do you
So it's
know
like-
how old
it's pretty
Trevor is?
close
Just
to
that Trevor
being-
was 10 years older than I am.
What is
All right.
happening?
So speaking of ice, climate change.
Look at that transition. Good. High five. There you go. Look at that
Ice
transition.
has been melting up in the
No, it's just a
Arctic.
government ploy.
Arctic.
You are
Arctic.
stupid.
Okay, well, so I want to clarify. The original plan was for students in each class or in certain classes to submit topics, and Charlie submitted for this class the topic of climate change, provided us with some articles and some stuff to look at. And so what is it? I mean, I think we all know what climate change is, right? I think we all know
Yeah.
that part of it. What is it specifically? Is there anything specific you wanted to talk about with climate change?
Climate change is such a broad topic. Like, it can refer, depending on how you define climate change, because, I mean, ultimately it's different to people if they learn about it differently. But for me, I think climate change is our global temperatures rising more so than how they did in, like, past. If you look at our spectrum, our global temperatures have risen, I think, by 2 degrees, which that doesn't seem drastic. But when you're on the topic of, like, if you're looking at how water freezes, bringing it back to ice, the freezing temperature in the Arctic needs to stay at a solid temperature for the ice to stay frozen. If it's 2 degrees above, the ice on the edges melt, and then that's getting rid of half of our Arctic now. I mean, there's pieces breaking off that are the sizes of, like, Texas or some even Brazil. So it's like, because of this 2-degree impact, it's now affecting our climate in the Arctic.
How big Africa is
Wait,
compared to Antarctica?
How long did it take for the 2 degrees?
It's actually
to
crazy.
shift?
Africa's bigger
What?
than
How
Antarctica.
long did it take?
took a long time.
It's been more drastic these past few years, but I think it took like 10 years. But on the scale of how old our Earth is, that's nothing. Because in a few more centuries, our Earth is gonna be completely gone. And of course, there is the thing of, like, this is natural. It fluctuates. If you go to one of my articles, which is on NASA, if you just Google what is climate change, NASA comes up. There's this chart, and it shows this, our carbon dioxide, which is obviously one of our greenhouse gases, which can increase our temperature by blocking infrared light. So our heat is staying in, and there's more coming in, but there's less coming out. So our circulation in our atmosphere is actually failing because we're increasing to the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Now, some of that we can't help, like the increasing of people, that we just can't help. But burning of our fossil fuels, the sheer amount of meat we all eat really affects this, and our agriculture especially. And it's now hit the level of where it can't turn back. So I think our level was actually 2 notches before this to where we could potentially help. I think it's that line. And now we're all the way up here. We can never bring back down our carbon dioxide level. What does that mean for our future? You know, we're not just hurting ourselves, we're hurting our futures.
Okay, so it would seem that all of this is scientifically based. We understand the problem. We recognize the issue. We know that whether we can or cannot completely fix it is different. But for now, it's relevant. Like, we get the problem. And yet, we are doing next to nothing about it on the global whole.
Yeah, it seems like no one is doing anything. And it's kind of, like, really hard to see because our media focuses on something completely different. When, yeah, sure, there's issues here and now, maybe about, like, who's in our political campaign or, you know, the amount of things we want to do that just aren't available. But ultimately, it all boils down to this, because this is our future. This is what's going to make our Earth 2,000 years later. It's going to be completely different. The global temperature, different from the 20th century average in degrees of Fahrenheit. One of the articles that I have, that was the name of the article, not just a random sentence. Last year's global surface temperature, compiled from measurements made by thousands of weather stations, was 1.69, 2 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than the 20th century average. And it's true that every year it kind of goes up and down, like one year will be hotter than the next, but this is overall. So overall, we're 2 degrees warmer than what we have been these past few years.
Does anyone else have thoughts? Just got heavy. It got real heavy.
I'm sorry.
No, it's already better than last week because no one has said the word meme. That's great.
I've seen like
I mean, why don't we just get a big freezer to put all the ice in?
That would raise the carbon
I said let's
dioxide.
get
That would
really
literally
big fans.
raise.
I said, Lucian, you just need a big
And
kite.
there's simple things that we could be doing to help, you know? Like, maybe adding more solar panels. I mean, we live in a sunshine state, Florida. We should have more solar panels. We could literally run on solar panels alone, but, I mean, it's expensive to change, but
Sorry,
it also
fam.
saves you money.
We need
and,
houses.
I think...
Tyler, do you have any thoughts?
I was saying maybe the world doesn't take it as seriously because climate change, it goes up or goes down very. So like she said, 10 years, so the world may not take it as seriously.
Or you
as
could
they
be
need.
like,
Yeah, it's not a relevant issue because it's not happening here now, and it's not something that we can change in the next few weeks.
I mean, I think it's been pretty obvious. Like, I mean, Florida never gets cold in January.
So in
this
Black
is kinda
Mirror-
weird.
Right, so you're saying, but I think so. There's a no. He's not wrong. He's actually not making a joke. Surprisingly, we have had climate has changed. Like the climate in this world has been affected. But the problem, I think, comes with either intentionally or unintentionally misinformation being presented. So it's called global warming. So when everybody goes, but it's colder right now than it ever is in Florida, so global warming must not be a thing. But that's the opposite, right? Like that's actually evidence to support, quote, global warming, even though it's colder. And so people have a problem with that. And I think there's a lot of misinformation thrown out there. And I think that's probably the bigger issue here that affects not just the climate change issue, but tons of other issues, especially in the U.S., about the media representation of these kinds of problems.
I mean, 98% of the world's oxygen is in the ocean, and that's through coral.
and what's really sad about that...
Most of the coral is being acidificated, meaning that the global conveyor belt that's going throughout the ocean may stop, and once that stops, the world stops.
Yeah.
Because we start having catastrophes, because that's kind of what keeps the hurricanes and all the, like, really bad natural disasters away from us, because it just keeps the flow moving. So once the corals stop circulating air, it's just kind of done for us.
Yeah, once the ocean dies, we
die.
essentially are all dead. Like, we
We're all dead.
are
We're all
putting
dead.
years on our planet now when it could have lasted so much longer, you know?
Yeah.
And it's kind of sad to see because no one really is taking this
It's
seriously.
like that old car you love that you just keep driving.
But not actually giving it oil changes or taking care of the engine in any way and revving at stoplights and...
God, that GTO was my life.
It's like something my dad talks about. He's just like, God, I love that car. And then I totaled it. I was like, why? That makes no sense. You complain about, like, oh my God, I miss it so much.
I mean, you're actually not wrong. That is a pretty solid analogy for what we're doing to the Earth at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is pretty solid. But it is, on some level, I don't know, it feels irreparable, right? Because people still don't have a good grasp of the issue.
And I think that's because of our media's portraying of it, you know? And I think media has a lot to do with what you were saying, how, like, it's not real, it's just a hoax, that the government's lying. But, like, you can test this out for yourself. I mean, there's ways to do this.
Well, and all joking aside, I think there's a fairly valid argument to be made going back to the simplicity of the humor that your generation seems to imply. You're just as happy to laugh at misinformation and joke and then exaggerate it even further and make another joke about it than we are to actually do something about the problem. We're going to turn it into a meme instead of actually dealing with it. Like, I'm sure somewhere on your stupid meme calendars last week there was a climate change meme. Like, it's global warming. It's always global warming. Like, I'm sure that's not
warming.
a meme. It's still not a meme.
Global
But
warming's always a joke.
Hey, Shreff, so do you think TV shows, like, I guess, give motivation to inventors to, invent something?
Well, I mean, if-
like, in Black Mirror, there was this car that was solar-powered. Like, the lady pulled over on the side of the road and then brought out her little electrical kit and plugged it into her car, and 3 hours later, her car was charged and ready to go.
I haven't seen that.
Which would, I guess, help the environment out a lot.
I think, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of research that has gone into how Star Trek pushed technology forward pretty drastically.
But we've been lazy ever since then. Like, I mean, there was a time of innovation, and it was actually, like, super crazy. Like, when Ford came up with the production line, and like we've had people like just like that just push just society as a whole. It was just crazy. Like you look back and how the world just kind of was just like, hey, let's come together and just make stuff cool.
Like we're still making stuff. Just
But I mean,
not